Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always told out of Voice of Radio, so today we need to take a look at Spiritomb. You see, ladies and gentlemen, there's a Spiritomb that came around in Chilling Reign, and it looked like a decent card that might see a bit of play here and there. It seemed like a bit of fun. But things have changed a little bit since we first saw that Spiritomb, and we need to take another look, because this Spiritomb's pretty gosh darned awesome. Now, it's not the HP. Now, don't get me wrong, 70 HP is nice. It means you have access to level ball, but let's be honest, right? No one's desperate to play this because you can search it with level ball. That's not quite the point. It's not the single energy 20 damage. That is out and out garbage. It is for one colourless energy, Ghostly Cries. For each Pokemon in your opponent's discard pile, put one damage counter on your opponent's Pokemon in any way you like. If you placed any damage counters in this way, your opponent shuffles all Pokemon from their discard pile into their deck. And this is a phenomenal attack, and there are many, many, many things that we really, really like about this particular attack. Now, we can start off with the fact that we're talking about single colourless energy on a basic Pokemon. It means, unless it was a free attack, and that's not realistic, you don't get better. This is absolutely phenomenal and wonderful and amazing. It means it is a single card tech in any deck that actually wants to go ahead and play it, and that's kind of my point here. It's not just that it's a really useful attack, though it is, we'll get there in a moment. It is the fact that it can be put into basically any deck so gosh darned easily, which makes it so gosh darned good. I'm a huge fan of this. Now, in terms of the whole dropping damage counters thing, it's amazing, because it's dropping damage counters. So you don't need to gust. If your opponent's got a Pokemon that is almost KO'd that is sitting on the bench, you don't need to use something like a boss's orders to drag it into the active to get a KO. You can drop damage counters on the bench and get a KO. But because you're dropping damage counters, it can't be blocked by something like Mew. Now, incidentally, it can be blocked by something like Metal Goggles. As it turns out, both Mew and Metal Goggles are both rotating very soon anyway. But the point is that protecting from damage is much, much more common than protecting from damage counters, so it means it's far less likely your opponent's going to be able to stop you. And this fits into two categories. You've got the Pokemon that have taken a bunch of damage and are about to be finished off, and then this finishes them off. And then you've just got the, I don't know, things like Galarian Zigzagoon. Galarian Zigzagoon is often played as a Pokemon in and of itself. Yes, sure, it can evolve into Galarian Obstagoon, and we've got some good Obstagoon, the one from Sword and Shield really sticking out among them. But a lot of players, in fact the majority of players that play Galarian Zigzagoon, don't play it to evolve, they play it for the Headbutt Tantrum ability. Drops the damage counter when you play it, and then you can reuse it with stuff like Scoop Up Net. So the theory here, very simply, is that you can reuse this ability over and over again, bringing Pokemon into range of being KO'd. It's a very good thing. So what you then come in and do quite nicely is just drop 7 damage counters and KO it. Because your opponent's got a 70 HP Pokemon sitting on their bench. And sure, I know a lot of the time this isn't going to be the first thing you go for. A lot of the time this isn't going to be your top priority. But it doesn't necessarily need to be your top priority. If you've got one prize remaining, take it out. It's one of those glorious things. I mean, we used to see Blacephalon do this all the time. Blacephalon GX. It had that single energy GX attack that let you discard one of your prize cards, and then if it was an energy, you could attach it. But the point was you discarded a prize card. And it wasn't necessarily what you always wanted to do turn one, but whenever you had exactly one prize remaining, Blacephalon for a single energy would win you the game. That's kind of what we're going on with Spiritomb here, because you can just take out those super easy prizes on their bench without having to draw into something like a boss's orders, etc. So all of those Pokemon are absolutely up for grabs. Small Pokemon, Pokemon that have retreated to the bench, and because it's single colourless energy on a basic Pokemon, this makes it all so much easier. The thing is, this was all true before. And the fact of the matter is, it's not seeing a huge amount of play, it's not being teched into a bunch of decks. But this is basically the spiritual successor to the Sensu-style Oricorio that came around in Guardians Rising. And that one again was a basic Pokemon that attacked for a single colourless energy, and for each Pokemon in your opponent's discard pile, you put 1 damage counter on your opponent's Pokemon in any way that you like. Now, this is actually a better attack than Oricorio, because you get to put the Pokemon back into their deck. Which, a lot of the time, in the late game, that will just really clog up their deck. What a lot of players, to be honest, all good players tend to do as they go through the game, is thin their deck to make it more likely they're going to draw into what they need to draw into at the end of the game. It makes perfect sense. This stops them doing so. But the thing that Oricorio was so gosh darn good against was Night March. Because Night March was one of those decks, and we've seen a bunch over the years, that did more damage depending on the number of certain Pokemon in your discard. In this case, it was a number of Night Marchers in your discard. So Oricorio was really good, because if your opponent had too many of them in their discard, you could take out multiple. Given that the attackers are basically Joltik and Pumpkaboo, you could often take out multiple in one go, and that was brilliant. But they could just set up and re-KO. What's phenomenal about this Spiritomb is that your opponent can't really regroup. Because when your opponent tries to regroup, they don't actually have the Pokemon in their discard pile ready to go. And that's phenomenal. So what do we have in terms of those kind of decks at the moment? Well, we did actually get one in Chilling Reign. It was one of my favourite cards from Chilling Reign. Currently not proving to be amazing, which makes me sad, but hopefully in the future. It's that new Lycanroc that for 2 fighting energy does 80 damage plus 10 more for each single strike Pokemon in your discard. So their goal is to try and put Pokemon in the discard and do loads of damage. Well, now every time they put a Pokemon in the discard, that means you do a little bit more damage, or drop an extra damage counter, I suppose I should say. But also, you're then putting those Pokemon back into their deck, making it so much more difficult for them to regroup and get big attacks going in the future. But I've just told you that Lycanroc really isn't seeing a huge amount of play, so what can we use it against instead? And the answer is V-Union. This is a phenomenal counter to V-Union decks. We're talking V-Union Greninja, V-Union Zacian, and V-Union Mewtwo. Now, we've done videos about these, and essentially the theory is that you've got to get all 4 V-Union Pokemon into your discard pile, and then you can play them from your discard onto your bench. But you've got to get all 4 in your discard pile before you can play them. So what Spiritomb does here is, if your opponent is building up to one big turn, and remember, all these V-Union, I've done videos about all of them, links in the description. All of these V-Union have phenomenal attacks, so your opponent is often building up to some big game ender, things of that regard. They get 3 parts of the V-Union in the discard, you use Spiritomb. Now all 4 of those V-Union are back in their deck, and they've got to do the whole thing over again. Except hopefully you're also putting more Pokemon in their deck, which is clogging up their deck, making it less likely they can actually find the parts of the V-Union. And then even when they find them, they've got to discard them, etc., etc. And that's kind of my point here. Against V-Union, this is going to really stop them. Now, as soon as they hit all 4 parts of the V-Union in their discard, they can just play the V-Union straight onto the bench and get rolling. So your goal here has got to be to stop that happening, to get Spiritomb rolling before they get all 4 parts of the V-Union in the discard pile. And sometimes it won't happen. Sometimes your opponent will have 1 part in a discard and you're like, well, it's not worth worrying about yet, I'll figure it out in a turn or 2, and your opponent then just gets all 3 of the other parts in the discard and plays it. Or you'll play Spiritomb and essentially waste an attack and often give up a prize when your opponent could never have got the V-Union rolling next turn anyway. Figuring out when you're actually able to do this is going to be super awkward. Finding the right time to Spiritomb is going to be a bit of a pain, but my point here is that if you're looking for an answer to V-Union, Spiritomb is one of the best we've got. And the thing is, this isn't the only reason to play Spiritomb. It is a great card for clogging up your opponent's deck in the late game, that's still true. It's a great card for taking KOs on little Pokemon or damaged Pokemon on the bench in the late game, given that it's a one-card deck, it's a single colourless energy, it's a basic Pokemon, it doesn't need gusting, it's really easy to get rolling. That is all still true. It's always been a good card, but people have been lacking that one killer reason to really want to play it, and V-Union is it. And if V-Union does take off, and I can't tell you whether it will or not, they're all super awkward to play, but they're all really good. But if it does take off, I feel super confident we are going to see just a deluge of Spiritomb hitting decks. Because it's a really easy one-card counter. And if you're terrified of Greninja V-Union hitting the board, because it can spread 100 damage, or you are terrified of Mewtwo hitting the board, because Mewtwo can go ahead and heal 200 to the point where it's just really difficult to actually ever get a KO, you can use this to stop your opponent getting that Pokemon out, and that is going to give you a huge advantage. Spiritomb is a great card, and there are reasons to play Spiritomb, several good reasons right now. But make no mistake about it, it is about to get, shall we say, even nuttier. So that's what I think, ladies and gentlemen, and that's why I think you should be playing this, but I would love to hear from you guys, so let me know in the comment section, would ya? Go nuts! Be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at TheWasi, and Twitch for some live action at twitch.tv/PTCG Radio. If you want to support the channel, get some bonus podcasts and all that good stuff, head on over to patreon.com/PTCG Radio, where you can do exactly that. But by far the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross. You've been watching PTCG Radio.